You're listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, with service members from across the military sharing their stories of combat and survival. And now, here's your host, Mark Zeno.
Welcome into the Hazard Ground Podcast. We always appreciate you joining us each and every week. Before we get to this week's guest, reminder, our website is live, hazardground.com. Go back and check out previous podcast episodes, get more pictures, bios on our guests, and a lot of great information about what we have coming up next. Also, don't forget to write us a rating and review on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Play, also on Spotify, all the places you can get the Hazard Ground. We really appreciate the ratings and reviews. Certainly help us get the word out there about the podcast and help us continue to get you guys some great guests each and every week. This week, our guest, our first overseas guest, all the way from Japan, where he is a Marine Master Gunner Sergeant, and he joins us via Skype, and his name is Orlando Reyes, and his story is an interesting one, not only because he served 3 tours in Iraq, but Orlando's main job now, one of them is, at least in helping prevent suicides in the military and in veterans. For those who don't know, the numbers are drastically high, over 20 suicides a day for veterans across this country, and Orlando Reyes is one of the guys helping to fight that as he continues his job with the Marines. Orlando Reyes, welcome to the Hazard Ground Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
All right, well, you are currently in Japan, in Okinawa, I assume, correct?
Yes, I am in Okinawa, Japan. I've been here since about August.
Well, how did you end up there? In short, why'd you sign up for the Marine Corps? How'd you get started?
Well, the answer is pretty simple. When I was first thinking about enlisting into the military, you know, I went to all the different branches, and it came down to one thing. I didn't want to be in another branch wondering if I could have made it in the Marine Corps. So I figured, you know what, let's roll the dice, and if I'm going to go ahead and do this, I might as well go all out and not leave any stone unturned or any, you know, regrets out there. So I went for the Marine Corps and succeeded.
And what year was this? How old were you?
1993 is when I enlisted in the Marine Corps. I was still a senior in high school. I was in the delayed entry program, so I got to do all the cool Saturday weekend, you know, prepare workups, and then finally, September of 1994, after I graduated, I shipped off to MSgt San Diego, and that was the beginning of it all. So on September 12th.
No objections from your family? They were fully supportive of you as a high school kid making this decision?
Well, my mom, you know, as all moms are, you know, she had her reservations because, you know, her son is going into the military. She didn't know anything. At the time, we were fine. There was no engagements other than, you know, recent Desert Storm that happened in 91. But for the most part, she was just more upset about the fact that I was leaving the house. But my dad was prior Army. My brother was prior Army. I had lots of military in the family. So other than, you know, just the empty nest syndrome, that they were fine with it.
So obviously it's 93. I mean, we're over 20 years now that you've been doing this. When you look back on your career, you know, and the way it started, did it go the way you thought it would?
I never thought I'd see corporal, nor did I ever think I'd re-enlist. So here I am, 23 years later, still kicking like I know what I'm doing.
Why didn't you think you'd see corporal?
Well, when I first came in, I had an attitude problem. That's what I was told. You know, I always wore my emotions on my face, and if I didn't like somebody, I didn't do a good job of hiding it. So it was pretty evident that whenever I had a angry mood, my emotions were on my sleeve. So I caught a lot of crap for that, and I definitely got incentivized training.
It's a polite way to put it.
Back how we used to do things.
Yeah,
back how we used to do it, and but it really it grew me up because I learned quickly that it's not personal. It's a job that you're expected to perform. You have your left and right lateral limits on what you're supposed to do, what you're not supposed to do. As long as you follow the rules, then you'll make it. So once I stopped bucking the system and kind of, you know, fell in line as I should have from the beginning, because, you know, it is the military, uniformity all the way around, and that's when things started to click for me. I stopped fighting myself and started becoming more aware of how to, you know, be a good Marine.
Are you saying that you got a code red? Is that what you're telling us?
I can neither confirm or deny. Kind of situation.
Well said. Okay, so you mean you enlisted in 94, and when you start your whole process, it's not 7 years until 9/11 when, the world changes. What rank were you? Where were you? And what do you remember?
Ironically enough, I was a sergeant here in Okinawa. I'll never forget, it was late one night. We had a pretty good community when I was here last time, and we would always go from house to house to house playing darts. And it was a typhoon coming through Okinawa, so nobody was at work, and we were playing darts one night, and somebody calls and says, hey, turn on the TV. And that's when we saw the first tower billowing smoke out of it, and we didn't know what was going on really. And then, sure enough, we saw the second plane hit, and that's just when things got real. We didn't know what we were watching, and we couldn't believe what we were watching. And it's ironic that my parents were visiting me here in Okinawa at the same time. So it was quite a weekend. We get hit with a Category 5 typhoon twice because the dang thing turned around and hit us again. And that's when 9/11 happened.
I wonder,
I'll never forget.
Was there a sense of helplessness and like a helpless feeling because you're on the other side of the world?
A lot of us, were immediately angry. Because we didn't know. Once we found out that this was not an accident and it was an act of terror, all of us were just, chomping at the bit. Like, what are we going to do? When's this going to happen? Because 9/11 was 2001. We didn't really start engaging until 2003. So it was a long, time between what happened to us and what are we going to do in response. But we did feel helpless. But at the same time, we were also very ready for whatever's going to come our way, because we being in a foreign country knew that we were going to be probably the launching pad for whatever was going to be going forward to if it ever did happen. So yeah, I guess we did feel kind of helpless.
Well, I guess, what did your superior officers and commanders say to you the next day? Like, what was the discussion?
Well, if I recall, the discussion was everybody knew what happened. So, they were just kind of recapping, hey, everybody knows what happened. Nobody knows what's going to go down yet. All I can tell you is stand by. We were at a heightened security posture as far as, entry to and from the base. We were all just wound tight at that point, but we were all told just to stand by and await further orders, but, do not start any kind of rumor mill of what you think might happen, because, every time something comes up, it's amazing how many individuals have been there, done that, and have opinions on what may or may not happen. And they seem to be the ones that people take at face value, as opposed to just waiting for the correct word to come down.
All right, so 9/11 happens, and you're in Japan. You don't deploy for the first time until 2005. Is there anything significant that happens between that time?
Well, I definitely had done my regular deployments. When I was coming up as a sergeant, as a lance corporal, we did pumps on the ship and things like that. But yeah, Iraq was definitely the first combat deployment. But when I was here in Okinawa, I had to do a B-billet. Everybody says if you're going to hang around, you're going to have to do something, whether it's recruiting, drill instructor, or MSG. So I dropped papers for recruiting because they weren't taking any drill instructors at the time out of my MOS. So I went to recruiting school in 2002, did my 3 years there, and that's when it hit. In 2003, that's when the balloon went up and Marines were starting to advance into Baghdad, and all of us that were out there on the streets were just, you got to be kidding me. We practice for the fight all the time, and now we're stuck on recruiting. So I really felt bad for the guys that were at the end of the tour when that happened, because they got put at stop loss, meaning that they knew that we were sending a lot of Marines forward, and we weren't sending any Marines to the schools, i.e. recruiter, drill instructor, whatever. So anybody who was on duty was staying there. So those guys didn't get to go either for a while. But while I was out there, I made good use of my time. I was recruiter of the year 2003, and ended up becoming the staff and COIC of my station, and finished my tour honorably. No incidents, no allegations, no investigations. So that was good. And I was proud of the fact that whenever I was across from a potential applicant, that I always asked myself that question: is the person sitting across from you worthy to stand next to you? And I kind of made sure that was always in the forefront of my mind whenever I interviewed somebody, because I didn't want to slime anybody into the Marine Corps, because it's sacred, and I wish more people would do that, but it is what it is.
Let me ask you, what was part of your sales pitch to a mother or a kid while the invasion of Iraq is going on and we're in Afghanistan as to why they should join the Marine Corps?
It's funny. I had that question asked several times. Moms and dads would ask me, can you guarantee that my son's going to stay out of harm's way? The first thing I say is, no, I can't. There's no way I can do that. No more than you can guarantee me that your son or daughter is not going to step out the house tomorrow and get hit by a car. Circumstances are what they are. What I can tell you is that if your son or daughter finds themselves in harm's way, they will be trained, and they will be trained by the best, and they will be surrounded by others who are trained to ensure that your son or daughter is protected and not alone and prepared for what comes their way. So that's the best I could give them as far as, when they were concerned about sending their son or daughter potentially to Iraq.
No, I don't know if there's as much you can't say that assures anybody of that. I mean, that's the best you can do is just be honest. I don't think, as you said, no one's trying to dupe anybody into service. I mean, especially not given the climate and what's going on. And also, there was a lot of people willing to go at that point in time. It's not like I'm sure that you struggled to find people who wanted to raise their hand and say, hey, I'd like to get in the fight.
Oh, yeah. I mean, definitely. After 9/11, there was a huge surge in recruiting across the military branches. And then, of course, once they started engaging, we started to see a rise as well. And that's when I was out there during 2002, 2005, when we were part of the surge effort. All the recruiters that were out there, we were trying to plus the Marine Corps up.
2005 is when you have your first deployment to Iraq. What were the circumstances? What was your mission? What were you told?
Well, as soon as I got back off recruiting duty, I got sent to Camp Lejeune, and from day one when I got there, I was like, you know what? I don't care what you guys got me doing. I want to deploy. Get me on whatever you guys can get me on. And then I ended up I was selected for gunnery sergeant. So, of course, that changed what they were going to have me do. So they don't really tell you as you're coming up in the ranks that as you pick up rank, prepare to find yourself in more desk jobs. That's the not so glamorous side. So when I picked up gunnery sergeant, I get assigned to 2nd MLG, G3 current operations. And I work in Al Taqaddum with the general staff. And I was in what was called the Dark Tower, and that's where the CG and his staff, would control the battlefield and the area of operations out there. So I was always in the eye of the storm, so to speak, as far as in the command operations center. We knew everything that was going on everywhere with everybody through all the branches and you name it, and we caught it all on our board, so that way we knew what was happening, whether it was an engagement, whether it was an IED, whether it was a casualty, a evac, you name it, we caught it all. So there was a lot of long days there, but it was definitely worth it because our actions and response helped speed and expedite reaction towards Marines that were in contact or any soldiers that were in contact, as well as anybody that needed assistance or medical assistance. So that's something that I took a lot of pride in, even though I would show up at 7 a.m. and not leave until 10 o'clock at night. So I never saw the sun much. I'm starting to understand why they called it the Dark Tower. But it was a good experience, and that was my first deployment for 6 months. Did
it bother you that you never got a chance to actually be in combat?
Well, here's the thing: every machine has its intricate pieces. You got your cogs, you got your wheels, you got your spokes, you got your springs. My job in the Marine Corps is logistic support. That my job is to make sure that the warfighters have everything that they need to pursue forward and win the fight. That's my role. Now, if trouble wants me, trouble's going to get me. That's how I always look at it. We're trained to be warfighters, but the Marine Corps wanted me to be in the rear with the gear, so to speak, ensuring that those that needed it had it. So I've accepted my role. Now, I remember I did an interview with the Marine Corps Times when they were talking about combat action ribbons. And do I have one? No. Does that mean that I'm not the full measure of a Marine? That's a matter of opinion, because if I was ever put in harm's way, I guarantee I would have returned fire. But the cards never worked out that way. So, but when I was in Iraq, there were Marines, I'm not going to say who, that were getting on convoys, that were trying to put themselves out there. They were looking for trouble. They wanted to try and get into an engagement so they can get combat action. And I didn't want to be one of those guys, because see, if you're putting yourself on a convoy, if you're putting yourself on a movement, you're taking the seat of somebody who should be in that vehicle, who should be on that convoy, who's more experienced, who's ready for it, who's been out there before and is a veteran of it. And now you're putting yourself with a group of individuals who are counting on you, and you've never been out there and you don't know what to expect. And nobody can tell me how they are going to perform in a firefight if they've never been in one, because it's truly the great equalizer. I've heard a lot of people tell me that some people excel, they respond without any hesitation, and some freeze up.
Yeah. And
so
it's surprising to see who does what. Like, you think some of the toughest guys would be able to handle it, and they freeze up, and then some of the people you least expect just know exactly what to do and act like they were the biggest well-trained warrior in the world. It's very odd sometimes.
Yeah. So, like I said, I wasn't going to be one of those individuals that was just car hunting and potentially put other Marines in danger. So that's what I just accepted my role, and I did it the best I could while I was there. While we were in Iraq, we did a lot of support for the Marines that were in camp, because the engineers that we had attached to us on my second deployment were constantly outside the wire, repairing roads and doing what they do as engineers. So there wasn't much support back in the rear when they were out. So my Marines had no experience or guidance or whatever on any kind of construction, facilities maintenance or anything. And we got ourselves some tools, and we started fixing that camp up, and that's what we did pretty much the whole 6 months out there. And we kept the place running. So I take pride in that, because without what we did, then other people couldn't do what they had to do.
Sure.
So that's how I always balance it out.
2007, you hit your second deployment. How was that different? Where were you?
That was when I was with CLB-4, and I was in Al-Assad. Al-Assad, eventually became Camp Cupcake.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm lucky to be able to be on the other side of an attempt, being able to talk about what I was going through, what happened, how I feel now. Because on the flip side, the other people who attempt suicide, it works. I don't want to call it a success, because there's nothing successful about suicide. But for those who actually go through and do kill themselves, they can't look back. They can't say, "Thank God that didn't work," or I'm happy that I'm still here. And it took 2 years for me to open up and talk about that. But I was in the senior list of PME in Quantico, and by now I'm a master sergeant. So for those out there who think having emotional anxiety and problems and things of this nature that I'm talking about will stop and halt your career, you're wrong. Because I was a gunny at the time, and here I am a master guns now. But I was at the senior list of PME, and I was if you don't know what that is, in Quantico, it's a 6-week course for all E8s and E9s in the Marine Corps, and it's an opportunity for us to get a different level of leadership training, as well as an opportunity for us to intermingle with other members of the E9, E8 community. We're talking sergeant majors, master guns, first sergeants, master sergeants. And during this course, we started talking about suicide, because this is before the Never Leave a Marine Behind program and the UMAPIC that they have now for the Marine Corps. And at the time, the Marine Corps itself was still trying to figure out how the heck do we quell this rise in suicide. So, of course, we got the meeting of the minds talking about suicide, and I'm surrounded by all these old dinosaurs, just like me, because growing up in the Marine Corps, if you had emotional problems or, family problems, or, hey, I'm not feeling, right because my mom is sick, you were told, hey, you know what, leave that stuff at home. You work while you're at work. You take home with you. I don't care about that stuff. You are going to do what you got to do. But now we're starting to become more active in engagement with the Marines and making sure that they are ready to be heard if they have issues. So I'm in this group of dinosaurs, and we're talking about suicide, and of course, all the old stigmas come out. These people who commit suicide are cowards. People who commit suicide are, they have no fight left in them. Blah blah blah. They have all these opinions about people who have committed suicide, yet they've never had to walk a mile in any of those individuals' shoes. So I kind of had enough listening to all this, and I finally opened up and spoke up about my situation. And immediately, I quieted everybody, because now they feel like it's kind of like when you're talking about a specific, demographic or whatever, and then that person walks in the room and then like, oh, we can't talk about that no more.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Well, now once they knew that I was a survivor of an attempt, their opinions ceased or changed.
What were some of the stigmas? What were some of the stigmas that they were just so people can know? What were some of the stigmas that they were laying out there? I mean, outside of weak, what were some of the other ones?
Yeah, they were. The common was, they're weak. They don't know how to overcome problems. They give up easily. They're cowards. That was the biggest one. Is the fact that they kept calling them cowards. That people don't understand what's going through a person's head when it comes to that time. Some people, yes, they plan a whole elaborate way to lead up to the final moment, so to speak. But then there are others who, like me, just snap. Like I'm done today. I'm doing this. But afterwards, it was good because a first sergeant who was in the group with us came up to me and said, I've just got out of a bad relationship. I've been drinking a lot more than I ever have lately, and I've been having a lot of terrible thoughts. Because of what you just said, I'm going to go get some counseling.
Wow.
Because I did get counseling. And that's when I knew right there that I cannot not talk about this. I need to let people know my story, and not to make myself feel better, but because I think that when you're sitting in a theater, when you're sitting in a classroom, when you're sitting in a group of people, and you're being talked to about suicide prevention and awareness from somebody who's survived an attempt, I think you get a different kind of attention from the crowd. They definitely pay more attention, and I've been told that people they thank me for sharing that, because now I feel more closer to the subject, and that if I can do that and get people more aware and get people to help others when they see them in trouble, then I don't care how I am perceived by others, because I would rather they know that I'm for real and that others get helped by it.
What do you feel when someone says that to you, like, hey, because of your story, I'm going to go get help. Because of your story, I'm going to go seek counseling?
Well, immediately what I do is I say, that's great. Come into my office. Let's sit down. Let's talk. Because I don't want to leave anybody just kind of like going off on their own. I want to talk with them and let them know that just because I gave that class doesn't mean that my time talking about this is done. I always am open and ready to help anybody who has any kind of problems. So yeah, I bring them in, and first off, I thank them for sharing that with me, because it's important that they feel that they can talk to somebody. And then I want to be that first person to show them that when you do talk to somebody, this person is going to give you their undivided attention. So that way, I want them to start that first step of many, knowing that when they talk to somebody, they're going to get heard and they're going to be paid attention to, so that way they can keep talking. Because, I was told a long time ago, you have only one chance to make a good impression, a first impression. And if you do not make somebody, who's finally ready to talk about something, feel comfortable about having additional conversations, then they will not talk about anything with anybody, because they don't want to feel shut down or embarrassed or whatever.
Orlando, when you hear that number, 22 veterans a day who commit suicide, what's your thought? What's your reaction?
It really sucks because I honestly, this is my opinion. I think that a lot of the guys and gals that are out there doing that are doing what I did. They're suffering in silence. I didn't seek anybody's help. When I was going through what I went through, I internalized it because, I'm a Marine. I can figure this out. I know I can do this. I can succeed. I can succeed because I succeeded in everything else I've been put in front of. So they're trying to figure it out on their own, and they're not getting the help they need. And maybe it's because they don't want to talk to somebody who's not been there. That's a common thing I've talked to, my fellow service members, Marines, sailors, Army, Navy, that when it comes to coming home and talking with other individuals about their experiences in Iraq or Afghanistan, they can't talk to anybody that wasn't there because they don't understand. So here, we're telling service members and veterans, go seek counseling, Well, I'm going to go talk to a counselor who got his degree from some college, never been overseas, never picked up a rifle, and they're going to tell me how to cope with my PTSD. So I fear that some of them are kind of counting it out before they even think about doing it, and they're suffering in silence.
Yeah, it's terrible.
That's one of the reasons why I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's terrible. I mean, it's just the number sounds awful, and the situation is even worse. And I don't know that we're any closer to slowing that number down or making it smaller.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when I would teach in my class, or when I would talk to Marines about suicide awareness prevention. That ideally, yes, we'd love to stop suicide altogether, but I'm a realist, and as much as I hate to admit it, we are never going to. But what I would like for us to continue to do is carry on this conversation, always making sure that we're always talking about it, so that way those individuals know that there are people that are sensitive to the fact that people have emotions and feelings, that we are ready to listen to them explain. And I think that's one of the things that was always a stigma before, was that the reason why suicide was so rampant in the military before we started getting more proactive about correcting awareness and intervention is because we just kind of turned a blind eye to it, because we're taught in the military how to use a rifle, how to drill, how to do our job, but we're not taught how to deal with emotions. We're not taught how to talk to somebody who is depressed, who is down, who has anxiety, who is suffering a loss, who has just broke up with his girlfriend, which is so common. And we're not trained before how to ask somebody that ultimate question. Hey, are you thinking of hurting yourself? And a lot of us wouldn't ask that question, not because, we don't want to deal with it or anything like that. We're just afraid of what we would do if we have somebody say, yes, I am. Because at that point, when you're here, yes, I'm thinking of hurting myself. Crap, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And now I'm responsible for this individual. And if I screw this up, this person might not be here tomorrow because I was unprepared to handle that situation. So most of the times before we were trained, people would kind of run that scenario in their head and say, well, I'm just not going to do nothing. I'll let the next guy take care of it. And then we would kick that can down the road, and before you know it, nobody took care of it. And then we find out that somebody has taken their life.
You mentioned that you have 23 years of service in the Marine Corps. Today you're leading the Never Leaves a Soldier Behind suicide prevention program. Tell me about that. Well,
the Never Leave a Marine Behind suicide prevention program is definitely one that I was very passionate about. Over the years, we started to see some success in Marines intervening and helping others that they find in despair, and bringing them to the attention of the right individuals, like the chaplains, the counselors, and so the MPLACs. So they've actually switched from the Never Leave a Marine Behind program to the UMAPIT, and the UMAPIT is another class much like the previous one. It's tailored to small group sessions of 30 Marines. We talk more now about suicide prevention, alcohol abuse, domestic violence. So we've combined multiple subjects into a different teaching platform. But it's still the same thing. We're having the Marines engage in discussion. And I think that's what the Commandant is starting to do more of now. We're getting away from the computer-based training, and we're starting to get kneecap to kneecap with the Marines more now, and letting them know that their leadership is engaged with them. So the discussions that we're having now is helpful because we're not just death by PowerPoint. And the Never Leave a Marine Behind program has definitely been a great foundation to where we are now, where we are getting the Marines, sailors, and those that are in the class to talk about their experiences, to talk about, family members who may have committed suicide or attempted, or, how they have felt from time to time whenever the chips were down. And we're getting the Marines to talk more and more about their own personal feelings and how they have overcome that adversity. Because that is the biggest thing that we try to teach the Marines now, is how to overcome adversity. Because that's something that we are never born with. Nobody can tell me that they knew how to overcome situations before they ever happened. No, they had to go through it. They had to endure. They had to talk to other people. They had to get experience, and then they were kind of, brought along the way on how to deal with it. So if we don't talk about, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish.
I was just saying, so if once now that we're getting the Marines to talk about this and share their experiences and how they cope and deal with things, it gives all the other Marines that are listening tools to put in their bag on, well, I'm married, I've never been through a divorce, but if that ever happens, now I know because of this guy's story what I might do to prepare for that. I mean, nobody wants to think about tragedy. Nobody wants to think about breaking up, losing a family member, divorcing or whatever. But when you get people to talk about their experiences that have gone through it, it lets other people know what they might go through should this happen to them. Because it's funny, nobody ever really pays attention to those tragedies until it happens to them.
Yeah. So where can people go for information? Whether they're civilians right now or military listening to this, can you just give websites, phone numbers, whatever it may be? If people are worried about a friend or a loved one or somebody, where can they go for information? How can they get them help?
Well, for all of us that are active, we got Military One Source. You have our MFLACs, which is our military life counselors. We have the Naval Hospital. We have chaplains. For those veterans that are out there, of course, I would love to say the VA, but we've had some horror stories about, the way things are going on over there. The best thing I would tell others that are out there is go to the VFW. Go to the American Legion. Go talk to those veterans that served in Vietnam, that are still around, that have gone through it. Talk to other veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan. Don't just put yourself in this mindset that if I can't see a counselor, then I'm screwed. No, there are so many. And I know that not one Marine would not drop what they're doing and answer the phone if their buddy said, hey, I need to talk to somebody, I need help. There's a Facebook page, Suicide Veterans Awareness, where I see all the time that I'm a member of. Hey, I'm feeling dark, I need help. Somebody just posts it on there, and next thing you know, 80 replies. Talk to me, let me know, give me a call, here's my number. So there's plenty of avenues that veterans can tap into. Not just counselors, not just the priest, not just the standard trinity of, where you should go if you're feeling down kind of thing.
Yeah, well, listen.
Talk to other talk to other veterans.
Orlando, I mean, courage comes in many different forms, and I applaud you for yours because it is something to be marveled at. The fact that you're still willing to share your story, and you've had such a profound impact on the lives of so many people, and you're creating a way for military members to get themselves out of darkness, get themselves out of trouble. I just think it's outstanding. I'm proud to have served with you, and I'm certainly, glad that you're still here, telling your story and sharing it with people and making an impact. I can't thank you enough.
Hey, I'm paying it forward. I'm still here. Like my wife tells me, God wanted me here for a reason, and I'm going to try and live up to my second chance.
Amen. Orlando Reyes, thank you so much for being part of the Hazard Ground podcast.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you very much.
You've been listening to the Hazard Ground podcast. hosted by Mark Zeno and produced by Matt Pasquarella. If you have an interesting story to tell and you'd like to be on the show, send us an email at hazardgroundpodcast@gmail.com. And if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.